I thought that was interesting that you could get the sense of dictators and emperors and rulers.
Did you buy a box for Joe?
No, no.
Hey, what's going on? My name is Eric Berry. I am a writer and comedian, and today I want to take a look at a recent appearance on the Bertcast from Marc Maron. If you're not aware, there had been some perceived drama between the two of them because of a comment that Marc Maron had made, which, as it turns out, as I'll say here, he's actually talking about Daev Chappelle, and it was a really great conversation. It was maybe the most present and attentive I have seen Bert Kreischer on a podcast with his guest, which was refreshing, and there were some, deep emotional moments too and stuff. But in the process of dispelling the notion that there was any issue between Bert and Marc, it did kind of come to light that there's definitely an issue between Marc and Joe Rogan, and perhaps Daev Chappelle as well. Ultimately, it was a very nice conversation and cool to see comedians come together, but they do address kind of a lot of the toxicity of persistently online culture and how algorithms on YouTube and so forth feed drama, which might even be why you're here right now. So let's take a look.
And then you get flack from both sides, really, that it was a softball interview. So, well, that's what I'm doing, because I don't like being in that dialogue. I don't like being in the shit talk dialogue that everybody's jumping for clickbait and for attention. Even that thing that happened between me and you, that upset me beyond anything I can tell you.
Oh, that makes me feel good because it really upset me.
Oh, it was terrible because I'm just on my porch, rambling. And sometimes I'm cranky and I make a comment. I think the comment was that in comedy, we have this cash grab culture where these drunks can do pop-up shows and sell thousands of tickets. And one of Joe's, Lena Riefenstahl's decided to make I
had to look up who Lena Riefenstahl was. This was Leni Riefenstahl, but was a German documentarian or filmmaker during Nazi Germany that some people consider to be very, very artistic and others say was a propagandist for Hitler. I don't know. I did a very cursory Google search. What Marc Maron is talking about here is these videos that are digging into the culture of comedy. And as it turns out, the YouTube algorithm seems to reward a lot of negative, gossipy, Gawker-esque kind of clickbait. And that, unfortunately, it's true on a lot of social media platforms that outrage ends up creating more engagement. And in this economy of attention, it's the longer people stay on something, the better for the advertisers and so forth. But I did find it funny that he was saying that Joe Rogan basically has certain propagandists that are working for him. There's no objectivity in any of this anymore. Certainly not when money is an influence.
Decided to make a fucking movie about it. And then I guess Joe got in your head and then you threw me under the bus on a podcast. And I'm like, I wasn't even talking about him. Okay, it would have been better if I mentioned names, but I'm so averse to being caught in the clickbait dialogue that I just made it cryptic. And I was talking about Chappelle because you don't do I had heard that he did an arena show that was a pop-up and he was shit-faced.
Really?
So that was the point of reference. And then when I saw you, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to say anything bad about Bert. And it didn't.
This has been covered ad nauseum by other videos, but it is very funny that if anyone's aware of Bert Kreischer's persona, the guy loves to drink, he loves to party, he certainly plays arenas. It's not out of the question that someone would connect those dots to Marc Maron perhaps talking about Bert Kreischer. And this will continue through the rest of the video, but Marc Maron's a very introspective, neurotic, kind of NPR-esque comedian. And Bert Kreischer's hey, let's have a good time, take off our shirt, crack open a beer kind of guy. And that's, that probably more aligns with the style of a Joe Rogan comedian than of a Marc Maron comedian. So it didn't seem that outlandish for others to connect those dots to this being about Bert. So much so that Bert himself seems to have thought it was about him.
And then it just got out of hand, and there was no way to put it back in the bottle. But I knew that. But I knew I could call you and just say, like, dude, it wasn't about you.
Oh, well, it made me feel good. It's funny. The internet will take. I stopped. I for a long time. I almost found it like, I don't know. I was stupid. I was naive to think that if I had an issue with someone, I could talk about them and not say their names. And it's the biggest mistake you ever make, because people assume it's someone else. And then all of a sudden you've got to go like, yo, Ron Funches, I didn't talk about you.
That's right. It wasn't, that's a good, if you're going to say something, you might as well
say their name because it's coming back to you.
Someone's going to do something with it. And I've got enough, tribal issues with a certain side of people that they want to come at me, that they're going to look for any opportunity to do it.
I don't know if I actually agree with what they just said, and I don't profess to have the answer here, but the idea that you should specifically name the person, there's been some drama, or I don't even know if it's called drama, but like Anthony Jeselnik has been very clear about kind of talking Joe Rogan. And then that's gotten back to like Tony Hinchcliffe, because I don't think Joe Rogan likes to get involved in that kind of stuff. Tony Hinchcliffe kind of being his mouthpiece, talking shit on Anthony Jeselnik and also about Marc Maron. I don't know. I don't know if being specific is good for riffs or not.
When you start breaking people's ticket sales and breaking people's attendance records, that is what I found got in people's feelings. And I'm watching it happen. I'm watching it happen to a bunch of us now who are, now are not selling the tickets the way that like Shane Gillis is. Shane Gillis is setting record tickets in everywhere. Nate Bargatze does 2 shows in an arena. He does a 4 o'clock and a 7 o'clock.
I love the guy. It's so weird because it's funny because when people start talking about, here's another thing that happens online is when you talk about another comic and people are like, hey, why are you talking about your brothers? Like, or whatever you don't know fucking comics.
Yeah.
All we do is talk about other comics. This idea that we're also respectful of each other's success and that there's some sort of a sacred brotherhood. Maybe we don't do it publicly, but I've been doing this since I was 22, and always we're like high school kids. Yeah. It's just the way it is.
That is true. But what I would say, I mean, comedians like to shit talk each other all the time. I think it's because naturally comedians are very opinionated, critical people. And then if you're passionate about something like comedy, you're particularly going to be critical of comedy yourself and other comedians. I do think where maybe the camaraderie comes in is when someone from the outside who doesn't have experience with comedy comes in and weighs in on how it is or how it should be or what's going on between particular comedians. That's kind of been my issue with some of these drama-filled, clickbaity YouTube videos that are out there, is these are people who are not in the comedy scene. And it's kind of like family members, right? Like you feel like, okay, you can shit talk and be critical with them or with your friends, but when an outsider comes in and says something about your brother, it's like, no, you're gonna stick up for your brother because they don't know your brother the way that you do to be able to shit talk him like that. That's kind of how I see it. Because
you're kind of you like cool shit.
Yeah, I guess.
I got Napoleon's cologne. I thought that was interesting that you could get the sense of dictators and emperors and rulers.
Did you buy a box for Joe?
No, I didn't. It's so funny. I was going to buy.
So this is the first shot that Maron takes at Joe Rogan in the episode. And obviously Bert is friends with Joe. And I think, Bert, true to his personality, wants to kind of be friends with everybody and doesn't indulge Mark too much about that. But as someone who listens to Marc Maron's podcast every week, twice a week, this is true to form in terms of him taking subtle and sometimes not so subtle digs at Joe Rogan and the Rogan Sphere comedians.
Have you talked to Joe at all?
No.
Not at all?
No.
No? What do you feel like there's a rift there?
Yeah. I don't think I occupy any space in his head, but I've gone on.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't think he's ever talked to me about you negatively. Like when he sent me that text, He was just like, what happened with you and Maron?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I have no fucking idea. That's just the internet taking it and running with it. And
well, he saw the internet.
And running with it. And Joe texts me because we're boys. And he's like, yo, what happened to you and Mark?
It's so funny because when he said on that podcast.
Notice here how Bert says that he and Joe are boys. And again, kind of how Maron does that little passive-aggressive dig thing. So Bert's just established he and Joe are boys here.
Like he's not one of your boys. And I thought like, well, that's good. I don't really want to be anyone's boy, to be honest.
No. But he's
So, you know, it's kind of just insulting Bert to his face a little bit right there. So like, okay, I don't want to be anyone's boy, but clearly you and Rogan, you're going to be boys or his boy.
He's never, Tommy loves you.
Tom. Oh yeah, I love him. I love him.
Like, I don't know.
Joe and I go, like, you have to understand something.
You've known Joe
since he started.
Yeah.
And it's always been a kind of a, you know, like I'm not a nerd, but like, you know, there was a tension that goes back to like, you know, 1989.
Jesus.
You know, again, it might be all me, but now like because of politics, you know, things have expanded in, you know, I am okay in my zone.
Again, Marc Maron, kind of an NPR comedian, Joe Rogan, a K-Rock comedian. I don't know. Clearly very different personalities, but I think that previously those types could coexist and be amicable. But because both of them do have a large podcast platform where they choose to talk about politics, that rift has become much clearer. Interestingly, I mean, you know, Rogan, up until this past election, would say, like, I've never voted for a Republican. He considered himself progressive. He spent some time growing up in San Francisco. So there's definitely been a shift in Rogan's politics. Maron's seemed pretty true to form. I don't listen regularly to Joe Rogan's podcast, but if I see a clip pop up on YouTube, I'll check some stuff out. I do listen very regularly to Marc Maron's. Interestingly, in terms of a clash between the two of them, a criticism that has been levied against both comedians is that they're much better podcasters than they are comedians. Obviously, both have audiences that enjoy them. Maybe neither of them are particularly my style. I saw Marc Maron's special taping in Chicago about 10 years ago. I've also seen Joe Rogan do a full set at the Mothership when I was living in Austin. So, you know, I'm definitely familiar with their comedy. But I think that they get lauded much more for their podcasting.
I am okay in my zone, you know, and they're, you know, and his minions, you know, if they don't like me, I'm okay. Because there's no reason like I got to get that audience. Like, what would I do with them? Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
So I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and I have been critical of him in a sort of coded way.
I don't think coded at all.
But look, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason.
Life's too short. And I've never. I think if you were in Austin, you did a spot at his club, he'd give you a hug. I think you would.
I build a lot up in my brain, you know, and I've decided like there's a whole tribe of you know, of comedians that, you know, think the edge is somewhere in the area of you know, trans and vaccine that just look at me as like some other kind of fucking comic. But
I think you can make jokes about trans stuff and vaccines and make them funny. The topics themselves are not inherently funny. You know, neither is talking about laundry, but if you can find a way to make it funny, right? So I'm not of the mind that you can't talk about those things. I also know what Maron is talking about in terms of kind of the Kill Tony world that's been created, where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna try to be shocking or offensive without there being a cleverness behind it or any heart behind it or even like a real point of view. Yeah, there are certainly kind of those shock comedians who maybe have more hate behind what they're saying than actual comedy.
But the truth is, one thing I know is that, like, no one can take anything away from me as a comic who's, the real deal who paid his dues the right way. So like, I just kind of live in that zone and I'm okay with my people. And that's that.
It is funny when
I'm not sure what he's hinting at there when he says I've paid my dues and no one can take anything away from me. Talking about knowing Joe Rogan since 1989. If Marc Maron's going to say, hey, look, I've put in the time and I've done the work. I mean, Joe Rogan has also put in the time and done the work. I don't think that Marc Maron respects Joe Rogan's comedy. But again, lots of people levy that criticism against Marc Maron as well. On a recent Kill Tony episode, Tony directly went after Marc Maron's comedy. So, there's an audience for everybody, right? You can be a bluegrass fan. That doesn't mean you have to be an EDM fan. There can be EDM fans, and they don't have to be bluegrass fans. And everyone can coexist and find the comedy that they like and speaks to them, I think.
And I sat with it forever. And then when that person I reconciled, that person was like, just so you know, I thought about this a lot. And I was like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I go, thank you to match my energy because it bothered me so much.
Yeah.
And he's like, it bothered me so much.
That's
I was
good.
like, oh, fuck.
That
was the greatest feeling.
Yeah. Well, that was the like kind of what was happening with that thing between me and you. I'm like, oh my God. Now I heard Bert's viewing, and it's like, it just wasn't my intention.
But it was happening to me with so many people at the time. Is like, because I was like, I was doing well, and I thought I didn't realize what I'd done. What I did was I had created this summer festival. This is what from what I can gather, I created this summer festival, and I brought my friends, and I was like, and other people too, like people I wanted to meet, like Bruce, and like I brought, I brought Bruce. I was like, I want to watch Bruce do stand up.
I had him on my show on Maron.
He's fucking awesome. He's great. He's so fucking fun. And then. And Jelly Roll came out, and I made these friends, but what I didn't realize is I became Comedy Central. I became the man who was not giving opportunities to comics.
Oh, right. Why didn't you bring me on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I alienated myself from a lot of people, and who then looked at my success, and they're like, fuck him. And so by the time,
that's just comic shit.
But I was getting that a few different times, and then when that clip hit me, and Joe's like, I thought you were boys with Maron, and I was like, motherfucker. And I go, even Mark? Like, I didn't think Mark, I couldn't catch a straight from Mark. No. And then,
it was totally,
but man, it sat with me. That, it's so funny, Mark, it
was totally aimed at Chappelle.
Are you friends with Chappelle at all?
No.
He's awesome.
No, I mean, I knew him when he was a kid and I know him.
Yeah.
But like, it was really just the commentary. Yeah. Was for me in my mind is that as a comic, look, I understand why people want opportunities. I understand why, people are willing to, look past politics or whatever, if they can get a break. And I also understand when, money is flowing, you want to get it. So like there was this sort of thing happening where, if somebody had enough,
I do think Marc Maron, he's talked very openly about this on his podcast. He has some bitterness and resentment about comedians who may have been given bigger opportunities than him. Marc Maron is hugely famous. He interviewed President Obama. He's had several TV shows. He's been in many movies. He's been parodied on SNL. Like, the guy's a legit success story, Believe me, I, more than anyone, understands being bitter at people who've had more success. I've had zero success. I've had good comedy shows, but no one knows how to get booked in the comedy world anymore at this level. So I understand being bitter. I get frustrated when I hear Marc Maron talk about this stuff because it's like, dude, you've had so much success. Come on, man.
What's the word? Enough popularity to just fucking, do cash grabs. Why wouldn't they? Yeah. And I think for some people, I don't need to mention names, like the quality of specials diminishes because if they want to turn out a new hour in 6 months because they've got the opportunity from Netflix, fuck it. I'll do it. You shift. Like, I'm very hard on myself about material, and I imagine most people are. But if you've got like millions of dollars in the balance and you're like, nah, it's okay. It's good enough. Why not do it? So the commentary.
I am dealing with this right now because I want to film a mini special that is not going to be anywhere near ready to where I want it to be, but because I don't have the opportunities to go out and perform it like this. Not because Netflix is banging down my door, but I want to film something and put it up on YouTube so that I can end up getting the opportunity to try to get booked at more clubs. It's kind of this reverse chicken and egg thing that he's talking about where it's like, oh, you need to be able to tour more to film the special that people want. But I'm saying we're at a stage now with content and putting stuff like this up where I think people are going to have to start putting out specials before they're ready so that they can tour. And then presumably the next one would be better because they'd get to work out the material. But I just take exception to, I feel like this is like a very specific viewpoint from two comedians kind of at the top of the industry that doesn't reflect what many of the rest of us are dealing with right now.
It's so scary with that shit. I just I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm fucking 61.
You know, comedy's gotten so big. It's now like professional sports.
Yeah.
People can make a living, a good living, and I don't begrudge them of making a living, just commenting on comedy.
Is that true?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Very
Who
much
does that?
so. A lot of people. I mean,
Like on TikTok and shit?
yeah. There was a guy has a podcast and two guys. One guy's a comedian. And the other guy's, I don't know if he's a comedian, but I know his comedian friend.
Yeah.
And so I saw them, it was a popular podcast. And I won't shout them out because I feel bad.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to get any negativity.
Yeah.
But like, I was in bed and I'm scrolling and I see the dude I know, the comic I know. I go, oh, hey.
Yeah.
And he goes, man, Bert fucking Kreischer. And I was like, oh, I'm about to get some flowers. This is going to be nice. I can use this.
Get flowers.
So I go, yeah. And then it cuts to his podcast partner. Now, in that short time, I have followed them and liked the video.
Yeah. Before
That's kind of wild. You know, Bert's known for being a little bit of a narcissist, but like the second you hear your name, you like and follow the person without any other context. We'll see what happens.
even.
Fucking Bert Kreischer. I go, well, they get a follow and a like.
Yeah.
And cuts to his podcast partner, and his podcast partner goes, fuck that guy. He is so fucking annoying.
Oh, boy.
And I was like, oh, man. And so, but Mark, I've already followed their podcast and I've liked the video.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, I wrote a DM to the guy. I was like, hey, man, I got to tell you, like, I just got to let you know, I followed you and I liked the video. I didn't see what you said about me. I'm not mad at you, but I don't want you to be confused when you see that I've followed and liked the video. And the guy wrote back to me immediately. He's like, I am so sorry. I talk shit about you. He's like, I'm just doing a podcast. I never thought you'd see it.
It's like, people just yammering. Yeah. And like, I've had, what was I just going to tell you? Oh, shit. Yeah, because I had Stavros on not too long ago, and and I didn't realize that him and his partner had been talking shit about me for years.
Oh, for real?
What's the other guy's name?
Nick.
Stavros. Yeah. I don't know that guy.
Nick Mullins.
I don't know any of these fucking people.
But
Marc Maron, so I don't know any of these fucking people. You don't have to know who Nick Mullen is, but Nick Mullen is absolutely hilarious and is a comedic genius. And I think if you're going to fancy yourself a professional comedian, you should know who some of your peers are, even if they're 30 years younger than you. Nick Mullen is a complete genius. And if you go back and listen to any of those Come Town podcasts where they're making fun of WTF, they're legitimately funny. And you should be able to have a sense of humor about yourself. I think any good comedian would agree.
Nick Mullen's he's fucking hysterical.
No, I know he's funny.
Yeah, him and Stavi together when they did the Come Town, that was one of the funniest.
Yeah, but apparently they've been taking shots at me for a long time. And and Stavros was great. I like the guy, and we had a nice conversation. And somebody's like, they've been talking. I'm like, I don't give a fuck, dude. Like, what am I going to do? Some guy.
When I listened to that Stavi episode on Marc Maron, I did think that the whole time. I'm like, is he going to bring up that Stavi's been shit talking to him? Is Stavi going to mention something? It was very funny to watch or listen to, but at the end of the day, I mean, whatever. Comedians are comedians, and people talk shit about each other, and hopefully you can sit down, have a conversation, a beer, hug it out, whatever. Or it's not even that serious. They're just jokes, But it was really good to see Bert sit down with Maron. It was a great conversation. If you're a comedy nerd, I suggest checking it out. And it seems like they've mended the whole thing, but perhaps now Marc Maron has opened up an issue with Daev Chappelle and Joe Rogan, who are, it is what it is. I don't know. I have no idea. This is just me watching both as a comedian and as a fan of comedy, and hopefully you've enjoyed this. Go ahead, give me a follow. I'll throw in a recent set from an open mic up at the end of this. Thanks.
You guys, I have some good news. Dry January is over. We celebrating? Anybody here anonymously sober? No? I was worried that I might be an alcoholic, so I bought a breathalyzer. That probably should have been my first warning sign. I have to invest in. I have it with me. You guys want to see how I'm doing right now? All right. I need you to do me a favor. When I start blowing into this thing, I need you to count backwards from 5. Sound good? All right. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It says I'm gay. That's not accurate. I am not gay. I probably should not have blown all that cum into that breathalyzer. That throws it off a little bit.